Hey, Renter Retires, it's Adam Schroeder here with another episode, and I am once again joined by Zach Lemaster, the CEO and founder of Rent to Retirement. And we are pleased to be joined today by Mike Cavaggioni. He is the founder of Average Joe Finances. The website is averagejoefinances.com, and we are going to talk about, financial literacy and a lot today and his real estate journeys. Mike, why don't you just start by telling people a little bit about yourself, kind of who you are, what you do, and how you became an average Joe, I guess.
Sure thing. Thanks so much. I think, for the most part, most middle-class Americans can consider themselves an average Joe or average Jane, right? But I'm originally from Long Island, New York. I currently live in Ewa Beach, Hawaii. I served in the United States Navy for over 20 years. I just retired recently. Still technically in, but, retired nonetheless. I'm a licensed realtor associate, financial coach, real estate investor, and I also host my own podcast, which you mentioned earlier, the Average Joe Finances podcast. Things for me kind of started way back in the day. Before I joined the Navy, my uncle, who worked for the state of New York, was investing in real estate, right? And he kind of put this bug in my ear a long time ago. His goal was to retire from being a corrections officer, right? And just drive around and collect rent. And that's, what he wanted his retirement to be, which guess what? He did that. And that's what he does now in retirement. And it always fascinated me. And it had always been in the back of my head. So when I was 23 years old, I went and purchased my first home in 2007. So yes, think about that year real quick. 2007, I bought my first home. And it was when I was on recruiting duty in Charlottesville, Virginia. And the house was in Waynesboro, Virginia, which is a small kind of little country town, about 45 minutes away. Really not that much around there. Well, now there is, but back then, not much. Not a good place to rent a property. And at the time, it was like, whatever, we're going to live here. We're fine. I got orders to go back to Norfolk, Virginia. We wound up, trying to sell the house. Didn't work out because obviously, at that time it was 2009 and things were a little bit crazy. So couldn't sell the house and we wound up renting it out. So I said, okay, I got my first taste of being a landlord. I was losing almost $400 a month, just paying my mortgage versus what I was able to rent it for. So that kind of stung, but it let me hold on to the house for a little bit longer. Anyway, fast forward a little bit, I had to short sell the home. And at the time, I thought I completely lost my VA benefit because I purchased the home with a VA loan. Well, the preface to Average Joe Finances was this kind of put me in a financial extremis, right? Where, I was racking up credit cards because I was paying my mortgage and paying for rent in Virginia Beach so I can keep my family together. And at the same time, just trying to keep the house. So by doing this, we racked up all of our credit cards, which we had recently paid off, which we were so proud of, but we maxed them all back out. And I said, something's got to give. And we wound up short selling the home. So then I'm like, okay, we need to figure out how to get rid of this debt again, because we're at a point in our lives where we're living in this apartment, we're paying rent, and we're going absolutely nowhere besides the little bit that's getting put away into my thrift savings plan, which really wasn't much, right? So we came up with a plan to eliminate all of our debt. At the time, I was getting ready to deploy to Iraq, and I kind of knew I wanted to go to Hawaii next. And I said, hey, if we go to Hawaii, I want to buy a house. We have to get rid of all this debt. We have to have money saved up. We need to make this happen. So we really knuckled down, and my wife was really good about all this, but we wound up doing the envelope system, and we followed Dave Ramsey's baby steps, right? 1 through 3, completely paid off all of our consumer debt. In a 2-year period, we paid off over $28,000 of credit card debt, multiple personal loans, which I don't even know what the amounts were. I should go back and look that up just to make sure, but it was a ridiculous amount. Yeah. It was a bad time. It's those things you kind of block out. And then we wound up saving $40,000 to have in the bank when we moved here. So we knew we were going to use our VA loan again, right? And when we got here, I had a little bit of extra cash that if we wanted to do any renovations or anything like that, make the home ours, we can do that. So we get to Hawaii and I said, okay, cool. Got pre-approved for a loan and start the whole process. We found the place that we were going to move into, we got it under contract, and then the VA comes back and says, hey, you don't qualify for a VA loan because back in 2012, when you short sold your home, this and that and whatever, you owe us $67,000 before you can get your VA eligibility back. And I said, whoa, hang on a second. You guys never told me that. I knew that there was going to be some type of ramification to short selling, right? But you guys never told me an amount or anything like that. They said, well, let's look a little bit deeper into this. So the VA goes and they start doing their research, and they said, well, the lender that you had back then didn't file the paperwork until a day after the due date. So this is actually completely null and void. Congratulations, you have your VA loan benefit. So I was like, woo, somebody's looking out for me up there, right? So we wound up getting our VA loan, and we closed on our home out here in Ewa Beach, Hawaii. And after living here for about a year and a half, that old voice in my head, that bug started coming up again about investing in real estate. And I was like, I really feel like I want to do this again. Let me talk to my wife about it and see what she thinks. And immediately the conversation went to, well, remember what happened, in between 2007 and 2012? Do you remember that? I said, oh, I remember that. I said, our bank accounts remember that too. So I was like, we need to attack this from a different angle and just forget that ever happened. Right. So, got together with two of my friends that I was stationed with in Roosevelt, amazing people. They already had a great portfolio going for them. And they said, hey, why don't you come over for lunch? Let's sit down, pull up a couple deals that you're interested in. Let's run some numbers together, and, bring your wife over. Let's kind of get her comfortable. I said, all right, let's do it. So we go over, I bought them all lunch, and we sat down, and I showed them two deals that I was interested in. Right. And both of them were good, but there was one in particular that they were like, you need to jump on this one. Right. So we did. We bought a duplex in Chesapeake, Virginia, got the wife on board, and we went in and did it. Now, we closed on this property in February of 2020. Guess what happened the next month? The world ended, right? So we were like, oh my goodness, are we destined to just not invest in real estate? Because that's what it feels like. So kept getting punched in the face with this stuff, but we made it work out. I had a tenant that couldn't pay rent, and we basically got them approved for this Chesapeake home repayment or rent repayment program, right? And they wound up back paying all the rent that he owed and late fees. So we wound up cash flowing on that house about $950 a month, and we sold it a year later, which for a profit, which was pretty nice. So we realized that the headache of trying to invest from Hawaii back on the mainland was very difficult because we didn't have a good team in place, right? So we said, let's look at something different. And I had been going to real estate meetups at this time, and started looking at multifamily investing. And that's actually how I got involved in multifamily real estate. I took some of the profits from that. I also took some money out of the thrift savings plan. They allowed us to pull money out without paying the penalty for the COVID relief efforts. So wound up pulling money out of that, and then invested in a couple syndications. So I'm currently in 3 of those right now. Too long didn't read. That's my story of how I got involved in real estate investing.
With and thank you for going through all that. I mean, it's good to hear some of the obstacles and challenges. I think a lot of people can relate to that, especially as they're first getting started. But I mean, with your podcast, Average Joe, I mean, you guys are talking about just financial literacy and savviness in general, right? So it's not all real estate. It's just kind of, a broad spectrum. But, I'm just kind of curious with the obstacles that you've encountered multiple times with real estate, and you've come back to real estate. You believe in real estate quite a bit. I mean, what is it about real estate compared to or in addition to some of the other strategies you discuss and teach and coach people on that's really, that you see beneficial and that keeps you on this course, even though you've experienced the obstacles that you have?
Yeah, so the obstacles can be a little off-putting, right? But I looked at that as lessons learned, right? These were things that helped prepare me for where I'm at today. And there are so many different ways to invest and put your money to work to the point where it's actually it's beneficial to you instead of just sitting in a bank account and wasting away. And those are some of the things we talk about. It doesn't necessarily have to be real estate, right? I have people that come on the show. We talk a lot about, index funds or investing in the stock market. We've even had some crypto and NFT folks come on. I still don't know enough about that stuff to feel comfortable about talking about it myself. But it's good to see that perspective and see what other people are doing. And that's kind of what we do with the podcast. But me personally, I like to, especially when I'm working with clients and stuff, figure out what they're comfortable with, right? My main focus as a financial coach is to make sure that they are getting themselves out of debt first. And when I say debt, I mean like the bad debt, like credit card debt, stuff that's not paying you back. There's a huge difference between bad debt and good debt. And a lot of people don't know what that is. And that's kind of what my goal is as a financial coach, is to help educate them on the differences between the two, right? So if you're sitting here and you're spending all your money on something and it's not paying you back, or it's not, giving anything in return, that's bad debt. It's not doing anything for you. Things have changed a bit, right? Like you used to think that buying a vehicle was just completely bad debt. Now people buy a bunch of vehicles and they rent them out on Turo and they turn it into a business, right? And now they have an asset, even though it's a little bit of a depreciating asset, they have an asset that's bringing in cash flow, right? And right now in the current economy, there's some turmoil, right? There's a lot going on. We just hit our second quarter of negative GDP. The textbook definition of that would be that we're in a recession, but it's not official that we're in a recession, right? But when you look at what's going on right now and the rise of inflation, cash flow is one of the things that's the most important thing for people to look at. Not appreciation, not growth stocks, it's cash flow, right? Because cash flow is going to be the thing that's going to be a guarantee, right? It's going to be your hedge against inflation, where, appreciation, that's a nice to have. And, stock growth, that's a nice to have, but something that's paying you right now and putting money in your pocket right now that you can then reinvest or use for what your needs are, is right now, like in my head, where we all as investors need to be focused on.
Yeah, I like the idea of, when you're talking about good and bad debt too, especially in high inflationary environments, having good debt is even more important during these times, right? I mean, it's the inflation that causes the money that you're borrowing to be worth significantly less in the future. And so that's just a strategic thing you can do now. Obviously you want to borrow strategically, but yeah, having a lot of leverage that's, you're paying the bank back with future dollars that are worth less, that's only expedited in a high inflationary type of environment. So just real quick, for the people that maybe were in your position or still are, where you were a few years ago, I mean, what are some practical examples you give to people that get rid of the bad debt? I'm sure you go through this obviously on a one-on-one with people, but just, some real world examples of how to reduce your bad debt.
Sure. Absolutely.
Hope people filed it the wrong day, right? It's a good way to get rid of that bad debt.
You lucked out on that one.
Yeah. So one of the things that I like to talk about and that has worked for me in the past is I'm very fond of the envelope method, right? But I like to do it, instead of using envelopes, I like to use bank accounts, right? And do something called sinking funds. And what sinking funds is basically, when you get paid, your money hits your account, and then you take that money and you split it into several other accounts that are dedicated for certain specific things, right? So you have an account that is made for paying off debt. You have an account that is made for expenses that are coming up that that are coming. Like if you have a pet, I have a pet/vet account, right? That's what we call it. We have an account for our vehicles, for maintenance, gas, everything comes out of that account. We have a fun money account, right? This is for family activities and things like that. So you want to split your money into these different accounts. And then what you do is, you're paying off these chunks of debt as you're paying it off. And of course, what's very popular, and I like to use this method too, is the debt snowball, right? So as you're taking this chunk of money that's dedicated for debt, you are dumping it into the highest interest, right? Credit card or loan that you have, and you're paying that down as fast as possible while making the minimum payments to everything else, right? Once you pay that down, you celebrate that little victory, go out to dinner, have a good time, right? Because you just did something significant. And I think that's important, that people actually celebrate these small wins each time, because it helps motivate you to go to the next one. So what you do is after that you paid off that big chunk, Then you go and do that to the next one, and so on and so forth. And we call it the debt snowball. I like to say that the snowball gets out of control and turns into an avalanche, right? And then before you know it, you've eliminated your debt, and now you have this money that you used to put into debt, and you're like, I don't know what to do with this. Well, guess what? Now's time you need to start looking at investing that money into different alternative ways to make money for yourself, whether that's in real estate, whether that's in index funds. It all depends on the comfort level of whoever we're working with, right?
Yeah, I love that.
You
And
talked about kind of creating your network at the beginning. You had your friends who you went to who evaluated deals. And they looked at it. They talked with you. They talked with your wife. Make sure everybody was comfortable with it. Obviously, people could include you in their network with the podcast and with your coaching. But how did you know that they were the right people to go to in order to get their advice? Because you weren't, if you took their advice and they gave bad advice based on what you were saying, you were out of luck, it sounds like. So how did you know these are the people I want in my network?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, for me, they were close friends. I had known them for a while, and I've been seeing what they were doing. I saw how they were investing, and I saw what it was doing for them. And when I got to picking their brain and asking them about how they got to where they are, what they were doing, it's just everything made sense, right? Because they weren't sitting here saying, "Oh no, let's go ahead and we'll get you set up and everything, and you pay us, and we'll get you taken care of." There was none of that, right? It was just genuine conversation about how they did what they did. They showed me their portfolio. They showed me their rent rolls, right? They were showing me exactly what they were doing, which made me more comfortable and made my wife more comfortable when we decided to go, in and go down this route. So I think one of the things that people need to do when they want to learn about this stuff is gauge the person who you're getting the information from and kind of vet them, and just make sure that, they're not just spitting out some information because it sounds good, because there's a lot of fluff out there all over the internet. You see it everywhere. People will sit here and show off their cars or whatever. And, oh, look at my, MTV Cribs house type deal. But, it's about somebody being genuine. To me, is what turns me on to wanting to listen to what they have to say. So going to different real estate meetups and learning from people has been super huge for me. Going to conferences and learning from people that have done it and are now sharing what they've done because it works, that makes sense to me, right? But then as you're building your network, you're going to meet people that want to invest with you, that want to partner with you, and you'll meet really genuine people. And I would say, and I say this in my podcast all the time, that 97% of the people that I've met in the real estate investing community are just genuinely good people. I would say probably about 3% out there are scumbags, and you got to watch out for them. But usually you can kind of smell them from a mile away because you can just tell, right? You start to get that sixth sense. But networking is huge, right? Getting comfortable with the people that you're around is huge. And make sure you vet whoever you're talking to. Just don't just take information because it's free, right? And don't just take information because it sounds good. There's a lot of stuff that sounds good. So just be careful, how you're consuming information.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot out there. And I love the point about networking. That's your network is your net worth. We always talk about how really, what's going to allow you, I think, at least in my opinion, to be significantly more successful in real estate is the people you surround yourself with, more so than any particular deal. So, this is something like in the coaching space, and this is one of the areas where, yeah, sometimes you get some bad players and there's all sorts of coaching you can pay for, right? But coaching that allows you to take your investing to the next level pays for itself. I've hired coaches and early on and still to this day for different aspects. But yeah, seeing people and networking with the people that are in the place that you want to be, that are actually doing it. That's very important to me. I just want to make one more comment too about your debt analysis. I think, that's very creative what you're talking about with like allocating expenses. And one way that at least we've been able to pay off debt significantly quicker is just by having more income, right? Having more side hustles or different ways to actually earn income to then pay off that debt. I was speaking with one of a family member the other day who was talking like a younger cousin of ours that is looking to they kind of get their first paycheck and it's like, oh, well, I need a nice car, and I need this and I need this. And we had the conversation about buying assets to support your liabilities. And if you can, connect with people early on where they can see that, oh, I can cash flow, I can use that same amount of money and say buy an asset like a house that then will pay that $300 a month or whatever will pay for the vehicle. And then when it's all said and done, you have an asset that's growing your net worth. Unfortunately, a lot of people do that backwards. And I have a history in the Air Force. We see a lot of like the young guys, right, coming in and they just get their first paycheck and it just goes, and then gets happen. And then, lifestyle creep and they just keep paying it off. Whereas if they would have, bought the asset to support the liability, just would have set them up for success at an earlier time. But it's never too late to start. So.
Yeah, Zach, I'm glad you said that because that's huge. Especially you mentioned what you've seen in the Air Force. I'm telling you right now, it's the same thing in the Navy. And it's the same in every branch of military that I've talked to. You see the guys that just join, they go and they buy the new car because this is the most money they've ever made before, since working at McDonald's or wherever they were at before. And now they're like, oh man, I'm getting like $500 a paycheck. Actually, that's more than what I was getting as a paycheck when I joined as an E1, but I think that's what they get nowadays, right? And they're like, oh, I can afford because I'm getting paid twice a month, I can afford a $500 car payment, and then I still got $500 left over. It's like, oh man, and then they're not taking into account car insurance or anything like gas, anything else that comes with that, right? And look at gas prices nowadays, right? You go you're making $1,000 a month as a E1, and you're paying $500 a month car payment, and then you're paying for gas. I mean, what are you going to eat? So stuff like that is that's the whole point of why I do what I do. And I think it's super important to get it out there. Just get financial literacy out there in front of people. There needs to be more and more avenues of this. And there needs to be, more financial literacy and education in school and in the military. I feel like, we do ourselves a disservice by saying, okay, you take one course and then that's it. I was very fortunate at one point. I was doing a resiliency retreat before I deployed to Iraq. And they had a guy that came in and it was a whole financial literacy course on the thrift savings plan and how to, leverage it and everything else. And then I learned how to invest into my traditional plan to lower my income to pay to get lowered back down to the next lower tax bracket. And I was like, whoa, this is super cool. I didn't know I could do that. And now there's so many different ways that I've learned how to get down to the lower tax bracket. Right. And these are the things that people need to learn, because it's going to be the things that save you more money. But there was also something that you said too, that is huge, that I also talk about a lot, is side hustles, right? Because besides putting your money into something to make you more money, there's also a way to increase your income so you have more money to invest. So that's also huge as well. Don't tie yourself down and think that you only have to work your 9 to 5 and then you're going to work that for the rest of your life. You can turn your side hustle into your main hustle, which I kind of did with getting out of the Navy and now doing this full time as a podcast host and a real estate agent. So
that's excellent. You talked a little bit about one of your first investments, doing it at a distance, especially being, I think you were in Hawaii at the time, right? So this is quite a bit at a distance. Can we talk a little bit about that? I mean, that's really what our business is. The one of the big values is being able to have that already established team and system and identified market based on select criteria and systematic approach to investing in some of the different locations throughout the U.S., regardless of where you're actually living. But let's talk a little bit about just, the obstacles and kind of the mindset of investing out of state.
Yeah, sure. And I'll preface this with, I thought I had a team built, right? I had a property manager, I had a general contractor. I thought I was good to go. What I didn't realize is my general contractor was very busy with multiple other properties that he was working on at the same time. Same thing with my property manager, right? And when I only have one property with them and there's somebody else that has like 28 with them, guess who's the lower priority? The guy with one property, right? So, that became a little bit painful. And the fact that I did everything sight unseen, because when I purchased the property, I never went out there to go look at it. I did everything via pictures and videos that were sent to me by somebody else going to look at it for me. And I was paying people to go look at these properties and send me pictures, right? And I'm like, okay, I think this is good to go. And, when there's something about not having that real boots on ground, that made it very much less tangible for me. And, it's one of those things that I've learned. Again, it's an expensive lesson. It's one of those expensive educations that we pay for with these lessons learned. But yeah, I think that's huge to have a team on station to make it happen for you. Excuse me, is something that would alleviate a lot of that pain that I had to go through. And sure, you lose a little bit more cash flow by doing it that way, but at the same time, you get that security. You get the fact that actually, yeah, I wouldn't say you lose more cash flow, because the stuff that I wound up having to repair and fix and refix and refix and refix, because I didn't have a team established, I probably would have saved a lot more money if I would have had that established team from the get-go. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's amazing to me to hear, going back to the previous answer, that 20-year-olds don't make the best money decisions when it came to when it came to
You did, right, Adam, in your 20s?
Oh, I was brilliant at 20. You don't even know. So when you kind of started the financial literacy, what are some of the places you went? What are some of the either books you read or courses you took that kind of helped you really get started, that, kind of clicked the light bulb? I mean, it sounds like maybe like a Dave Ramsey type program, just to kind of get out of the debt that you were in. But then, not only just what you were learning to get out of the debt, but then to actively get into asset acquisition.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Adam. So, yes, if I did start off with the whole Dave Ramsey method and following the baby steps, and quickly learned that once I got out of debt, that this program was no longer something I was interested in. Of course, I read the Purple Bible, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that kind of like lit a fire under me that I was like, I have to do this. Like, I need to make this happen. And after that, I read Richest Man in Babylon, which is actually my favorite personal finance book, like, that you could ever possibly read. For some people, it's hard to digest because of the way it's written. Again, it was written, excuse me, it was written in 1926, but at the same time, the basic principles and foundations that it give you is better than anything else I think I've ever read, right? Just when it comes to something foundational. So building upon that, learning that I needed to start investing in assets that were going to pay me instead of just putting my money in savings, right? Where it's like a 0.05% interest rate, and my money is basically just withering away. Inflation is chopping at it like an axe, taking down the rainforest, right? So there's little things that you can do to get past that. So one of the things I've learned to do is actually start to leverage my debt, right? So there was something that Zach said earlier, which is huge. And that is, basically you're borrowing yesterday's dollars, which is worth more than today's dollars, right? And you get to leverage that. So I have a mortgage on my home right now at 2.25% interest rate that I'm paying on a loan from 2018, where the money back then was worth more than what it is today. So my mortgage payment today is a lot less than what it was 4 years ago, right? And I look at that, and I look at also different ways to leverage my debt. So I have a HELOC on my home, and I do something called velocity banking, which is something completely different. A lot of people, sometimes it makes their head spin when you try to explain it to them. But basically, I've turned my home into a checking account, and I get to pull equity out and use it. It's tax-free money that I get to use to buy other assets that cash flow. And that's one of the things that I've been doing. I've actually used the money to actually invest in a syndication, and I've almost paid it all the way back. And what I do is I take all my cash flow, my paycheck from the Navy, soon to be my retirement check, and I take my investments, all my real estate commissions as a realtor, everything I make in my business, and I dump it back into the HELOC and pay it down as fast as possible. And then what I'm going to do in a couple months is I'm going to go back to the bank and say, hey, because at the same time I'm chunking down my mortgage, right? I'm going to go back to the bank and say, hey, I'd like to apply for a new HELOC, because as you could see, I paid down $100,000 in my mortgage, and I'd to increase my line of credit. And they'll say, oh yeah, Mr. Cavaggioni, we can see that you paid this down. Great job. Yeah, let's go ahead and increase your line of credit another 100K. And then boom, I've got another 100K that I have to play with that's liquid on top of what I've already had that I already paid down, right? So that's kind of like the quick down and dirty of that. But that's one of the tactics I like to use personally, to leverage debt in my favor.
I love it. Very strategic. Mike, if you had to give someone advice as far as that's, just getting started and learning about being financially literate, learning about, real estate investing in general, maybe they have quite a bit of bad debt at this point or not. I mean, but someone that's just starting this journey that was in your shoes years ago, can you give them some advice on things to do to help expedite their success or things to focus on?
Yeah, absolutely, Zach. So I would say right now I have something called the 4 pillars of building wealth, right? And the first one is education. So you need to educate yourself. If you're going to invest in something, invest in yourself first. If you're going to pay for a coaching program, that's fine. Do it. If you're going to pay for some type of courses, that's fine too. Do it if that's what works for you, if that's how you learn, right? I myself, even though I'm a financial coach, I also have a coach, right? I have a coach that helps me with being a realtor, right? And I pay a significant amount of money for that because I think it's something that I need help with to make sure that I'm doing what I need to do a good job, right? So it's about that accountability piece. So education, right? The next thing is mentorship and coaching, which kind of goes hand in hand with that, right? But find yourself a mentor, right? Or find yourself a coach. But a mentor is really good as well. There is a difference between the two, but find somebody that you could look up to. Zach, you had mentioned earlier too that the people that you surround yourself with, that will make a difference in how you build your own wealth and how you invest and just how you are in general. If you're hanging out with 5 millionaires, guaranteed in the future you will become the sixth one, right? So it is important who you're hanging out with. So get a good mentor or a good coach. The next thing is networking and relationships. And networking is huge. Go to local real estate meetups, go meet people, talk to them, get to know them. Don't just network, but build relationships. Stay in touch with people, right? Have dinner, have lunch, go out and just really get to know these people. Because that is the whole point about building a relationship. When you build a good relationship, they're going to think about you the next time a good deal pops up and they need a partner. Okay. And then the fourth and final thing is the most important one. That's action. You need to take action. So if you did the first 3 and you're just kind of sitting around waiting for, the best deal to fall into your lap, it's never going to happen, right? You need to go out there and take action today and make it happen. So, everybody knows that famous saying that the best time to invest in real estate was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. That still holds true no matter what, no matter how bad the market gets or how crazy it gets or how high interest rates go. There's always deals out there. There's always a way to make it work and make it happen. You just got to take the action and move forward.
Yeah. How do you say that to people? I mean, right now, like you were just saying, I mean, we're seeing, prices higher than they were, a year or 2 years ago. You're seeing interest rates getting higher. You hear people telling you the sky is collapsing. How do you switch that mindset to say, you know what, I can still find a deal? Like, how do you, I mean, because you can say take action, but there's still kind of the switch you have to flip in your mind. So is there a specific thing you recommend to people to say, hey, you might be scared, but you can still take action today?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I'll give you a perfect real world example of a client that I'm working with right now. Okay. Not going to name any names to protect the unidentified, right? But so I was doing some cold calls as a real estate agent, right? Just going through some old leads, right? This one was about 2 years old. And I call this guy and I'm talking to him. And he was looking at buying places 2 years ago. And he's like, oh, with the way the economy's been and interest rates, he's like, I'll never be able to afford it. So we were just kind of chatting. I said, what's your budget? What are you looking for? And he's like, oh, I think I can afford this amount. So I went and pulled it up in a calculator and said, what is the ideal monthly payment you were looking for? And he's like, oh, about, between 2000 and between 2000 and 2400. I said, okay, well, the amount that you thought you were going to be good for, you're actually be paying close to 3,500. So that's not really going to work. But I said, let's look at something that's more realistic for you. Okay. And I said, why don't you, instead of looking at these larger single family homes, start looking at some of these condos out here that are doing quite well and also appreciating in value. That way you got something to step your foot into and take a look at. He's like, oh, I never really thought about that. He's like, but let's go ahead and take a look. So I start pulling up some stuff and I showed him, hey, look, this is available. This is available. This is available. It's just you and your significant other. So, it's not like you need a 4-bedroom house or anything like that. So we start crunching numbers. He's like, I had no idea that this was even an option for me in the past. So the point of that is if you take a little bit of time to sit down, and this became that education and mentorship piece right there, right? So I sat down and I went over everything with him. I kind of, I educated him on what was out there and gave him a little bit of mentorship on what he can do. Because I told him, I said, look, there's not that many buyers out there right now because interest rates went up. The competition has gone down. I was like, so, you get in, you buy this place now, when interest rates start to go back down, which actually they did recently, they dropped down a pretty nice chunk, right? I said, the people that are buying right now, you know what they're going to do? They're going to go refinance in 6 months. But guess what they did 6 months earlier? They bought the place that you didn't want to look at because interest rates were too high. So, that's kind of the thing, is you got to get over that fear, and you got to get over that, well, I'm just going to wait it out until it gets better. Look, things may or may not get better, right? But if you get in now, especially out here in Hawaii, so I'll give you an example too, or just for food for thought or context here, is that Hawaii is an appreciation market. So if you're going to live in the asset, you're going to live in the property, it's great. It's not a great place to buy a property to rent out, right? So he was looking for a place to live in, and he wanted something that would, eventually he'd be able to sell in the future and maybe move into something bigger. So out here in Hawaii, the average price of a home almost doubles every 10 years. So, and that's pre-COVID, right? That's pre the craziness that we just saw over the past 2 years. So it's a smart move to get yourself into something that, instead of, throwing your money away in rent, because when he was telling me what he paid for rent and he'd be paying the same price as a mortgage, I said, look, man, I was like, in a couple of years, you'll have, maybe $30,000-$40,000 of equity that, that you now have, that to add to your net worth, right? That you didn't have just living in a rental property and just throwing your money away. So it's overcoming that fear of the unknown is the biggest thing I think people need to get over.
All right. Well, that was Mike Cavaggioni. He is the founder of Average Joe Finances. You can find his website at averagejoefinances.com. Really appreciate you joining us here today. Again, it's averagejoefinances.com, and you can find us at renttoretirement.com. You can see the assets we have there that can make sense and get you cash flowing day one. Again, that's renttoretirement.com. Don't forget to head on over to your podcast platform and leave us a review. We greatly appreciate all of you who have. And if you have any questions, email podcasts@renttoretirement. That's podcasts@renttoretirement. And we'll talk to you on the next episode.
Thanks for watching the Rent to Retirement YouTube channel. Check out some of our other videos, like this one, or this one here.